The first time I saw him, I thought he was a trick of the headlights. It was just after midnight, the kind of cold, dead quiet you only get in neighborhoods where everyone has already gone to bed and every house looks sealed shut. I had worked late, stopped for gas, and spent the whole drive home fighting that weird, heavy feeling you get when the roads are too empty for too long. When I turned onto my street, my high beams washed over my driveway, and for a second, I saw a man standing near the garage. Not moving, not waving, just standing there with his arms at his sides, facing the house. I slammed on the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked against my chest, but by the time the car fully stopped, there was nobody there. I remember sitting behind the wheel with the engine running, staring at the driveway and trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. The garage door was shut. My porch light was off because the bulb had burned out a week earlier, and I kept forgetting to replace it. The front yard was empty. No one by the mailbox, no one near the side gate, no one anywhere. I even flicked my headlights from high to low a few times like that would somehow make him reappear. Nothing. I told myself it was probably a bush shadow or the shape of the trash cans or just exhaustion. I was a dispatcher for a plumbing company at the time, and during winter we got flooded with emergency calls. My sleep schedule was wrecked. I had every reason to believe my brain had just stitched a human figure together out of darkness and stress. So I got out, went inside, locked the door behind me, and tried not to think about it. The problem was, once you've seen something like that, even for a second, your mind keeps replaying it. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, seeing that shape again and again. The posture was what bothered me most. He hadn't looked like someone caught sneaking around. He looked like someone waiting, like he had been there for a while and was expecting me. I didn't sleep much. The next evening, I got home earlier. It was still light out, and I actually laughed at myself while unlocking the front door. The driveway looked small and harmless. I checked around the side of the house, opened the gate to the backyard, and even looked behind the detached shed, even though I knew how stupid that was. There was nothing to find. Nobody had been there. My nerves were just fried. That should have been the end of it. Instead, 2 nights later, I saw him again. This time, I wasn't driving. I was in the kitchen rinsing out a coffee mug before bed when something outside caught my eye. My kitchen window looks out toward the side of the driveway. You can't see the whole thing from there, just a narrow angle between the fence and the front corner of the garage. But in that sliver of view, under the weak yellow light from my neighbor's porch, I saw a person standing in the driveway again. Same stillness, same unnatural calm. My body reacted before my brain did. I ducked so fast I nearly dropped the mug. It cracked in the sink, and I just stayed there, crouched under the window, my heart hammering so hard it made my arms shake. I waited maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30. It felt like forever. Then I slowly stood back up just enough to look. No one. I grabbed my phone and rushed to the front room where I could look through the blinds toward the driveway more directly. Empty. Completely empty. I opened the front door, stepped onto the porch, and looked around like an idiot, half expecting to find some teenager running off laughing. No footsteps, no car door, no movement. I called my older brother Nate because he lived 15 minutes away, and because I didn't want to say any of it out loud to someone who might think I was losing it. Nate had that annoying talent of staying calm no matter what. He listened, then said it was probably someone messing with me, or maybe a package thief checking houses. He told me to get a motion light and maybe a camera. He also asked the question I'd been avoiding. Did you actually see his face? I hadn't. That was another thing that felt wrong. Both times I knew I was looking at a man, not because of the face, but because of the frame. Tall, broad shoulders, dark clothes, but the face never registered. It was like the details stopped at the neck. Just a head-shaped darkness where a face should have been. The next morning, I bought a motion floodlight camera from a hardware store and installed it above the garage myself. It took longer than expected, and by the time I finished, I was sweaty, irritated, and feeling better. Practical steps help. They make fear feel manageable. I tested the camera with my phone, checked the angle, and made sure the driveway was fully visible from the curb to the garage. That night, I kept the app open beside me on the couch. Around 1:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I sat up so fast, I pulled a muscle in my neck. The notification preview showed my driveway in grainy black and white. At first glance, it looked empty. Then I tapped the clip and saw him. He wasn't entering the driveway. He was already standing in it when the recording began. Just a man-shaped figure near the center, facing the house. He didn't move for the first 5 seconds of the clip. The camera timestamp counted upward while he remained completely still, like a paused image. Then, right before the recording ended, he tilted his head slightly to one side. Not much, just enough to feel deliberate. The clip cut off after 10 seconds. I replayed it over and over until I realized I was holding my breath. Then I hit live view. The driveway was empty. I called the police, and I knew while doing it that I sounded ridiculous. A suspicious person in the driveway, not currently visible, may have been captured on camera. The dispatcher was polite in that careful way people get when they think you're probably overreacting, but might still be right. A patrol car came by 20 minutes later. The officer looked around the property, checked the side yard, the backyard, the alley behind the fence. Nothing. He watched the clip and frowned a little, but even he seemed unsure what to make of it. Could be someone casing houses, he said. Keep your doors locked. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made things worse because the officer had watched the video twice and never once asked why the man didn't approach the house or where he went between the clip ending and the live view showing nothing. He just handed my phone back like he didn't want to think about it too hard. I barely slept that night. Every little sound snapped me awake. The refrigerator clicking on, branches scraping the siding, a car passing at the far end of the block. By morning, I'd convinced myself I needed to stay somewhere else for a few days. Just long enough to clear my head. Nate said I could crash at his place, but I had work early and didn't want the longer commute, so I stayed. The next evening, my neighbor from across the street, Mrs. Kelleher, flagged me down while I was getting the mail. She was in her late 60s, the kind of person who always knew when everybody on the block left for work, came home, or had company over. She leaned close and asked if I'd had someone waiting for me the last few nights. I actually felt my stomach drop. I asked her what she meant, and she said she hadn't wanted to interfere, but she'd looked out her upstairs window twice this week and seen a man standing in my driveway after midnight. She assumed at first it was a friend of mine locked out of a car or something, but last night, after seeing the police cruiser, she figured she should say something. I asked what he looked like, and she said, tall, just standing there. I couldn't see his face. That was the moment it stopped being stress, or imagination, or bad lighting. Another person had seen him, from a different angle, on a different night. I asked her if she saw where he went. She hesitated, then said something I still think about more than the video. He didn't go anywhere, she said. I looked down to put my glasses on, and when I looked back, he wasn't there anymore. That night, I left every light on in the house. I didn't care about the electric bill. I put a chair under the front doorknob, even though it opened inward, and the chair wouldn't have done much. I kept the baseball bat from my closet beside the couch. I watched the camera feed for hours. At 2:07 a.m., the motion alert went off again. My hands were shaking before I even unlocked the phone. Same angle, same driveway, same figure. But this time, he was closer to the house. Not at the center of the driveway, not by the curb. He was standing directly in front of my car, close enough that if I'd been outside, I could have reached him in 5 steps. His head was angled down like he was staring through the windshield. Then, slowly, while the camera recorded, he lifted his face toward the garage camera. Even through the distortion, even through the low resolution, I could tell something was wrong. There should have been features, eyes, a nose, the shape of a mouth. Instead, it looked blurred, smudged, almost erased, like the camera couldn't hold on to it, like every part of him was in focus, except the one part that mattered. The recording ended. I didn't check live view. I heard the sound first, 3 slow knocks from the front door. By the time I noticed him, he'd already been there long enough to make it feel impossible. I was upstairs folding laundry in my bedroom when I happened to glance through the blinds toward the front of the house. It wasn't even a dramatic moment. No thunder, no strange noise, nothing like that. My eyes just drifted toward the driveway because movement usually catches your attention, and for half a second I thought someone had left a coat hanging near the sidewalk. Then I realized it was a man. He was standing at the very end of the driveway, just past where the concrete met the street, facing the house like he was deciding whether to come closer. It was late enough that the whole neighborhood had gone still. The only light came from the street lamp on the corner and the blue glow of my bedroom TV reflecting off the window. He was far enough away that I couldn't make out his face, but I could tell he wasn't looking around like someone lost, and he wasn't moving like someone walking by. He was just there. I remember freezing with one of my shirts still in my hands. The first thing I did was check the time, 11:46 p.m. The second thing I did was tell myself there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe it was someone waiting for a ride. Maybe someone was on the phone. Maybe they were looking for an address and happened to stop in front of my house. Everything in my head rushed to make him ordinary before the fear could set in fully. But after nearly a minute, he still hadn't moved. I walked out of my room, crossed the landing, and looked through the small front window near the stairs for a better angle. He was still there. Same posture, same stillness. Hands down at his sides. I couldn't explain why that bothered me as much as it did, but it did. There's something deeply wrong about a person standing completely still in the dark outside your home, especially when they're facing it directly. It feels less like being watched and more like being chosen. I locked the front door, even though it was already locked, then checked the back door and the sliding glass door in the kitchen. I texted my girlfriend, Alyssa, who was out of town visiting her sister, and told her there was some weird guy standing outside. She replied instantly, asking if I wanted her to call the police. I told her not yet. I didn't want to be the paranoid homeowner calling 911 because somebody was standing near the curb, so I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I went back upstairs and looked again. He hadn't changed position. If anything, he looked even stranger now because the stillness no longer seemed natural. Even people standing around shift their weight. They check their phone. They scratch their arm. They turn their head when a car passes. This guy did none of that. He stood there like he'd been placed. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in through the glass, trying to get a picture. All I got was a grainy blur and the reflection of my room behind me. When I lowered the phone, he was still there, and I had the sudden, humiliating thought that maybe he could somehow tell I'd been trying to photograph him. That's when he started walking. Not toward the sidewalk, not back down the street, toward the house. He didn't hurry, he didn't sneak. He just stepped off the curb and moved slowly up the driveway in a straight line. Like he had every right to be there. I backed away from the window so fast I stumbled into the dresser. My heart was pounding hard enough to make my vision pulse. I called Alyssa instead of the police because panic does stupid things to your priorities. And the second she answered, I whispered, "He's coming up the driveway." She started telling me to lock myself in the bedroom and call 911, but I was already moving downstairs because part of me needed to see where he was. I crept to the front hall and looked through the narrow glass panel beside the door. He was halfway up the driveway now. The porch light should have given me a clear view, but somehow it didn't. His clothes were dark, maybe a hoodie or a jacket, and his build looked average, not especially tall or broad, completely forgettable. But the face looked wrong. Not hidden exactly, just hard to hold on to. I could look straight at it and still not come away with any features. It was like my eyes kept sliding off it. He stopped beside my car. My car was parked near the garage, which meant he had come almost all the way up to the house. He stood there with his head tilted toward the driver's side window, as if he were trying to look in. Then he slowly turned toward the front door, toward me. I don't know if he could actually see me through the glass panel, but every nerve in my body reacted like he could. Alyssa was still talking in my ear, her voice small and frantic, asking what he was doing, but I couldn't answer. I felt pinned in place. Staring at a stranger on my own property who had approached in total silence and was now facing the house like he was waiting for permission to do something worse. Then he lifted one hand. He didn't knock. He just placed his palm flat against the front door. That scared me more than knocking would have. A knock is human. A knock says, I want something, or I need something, or I'm trying to get your attention. This felt different, calm, testing, like he wanted to feel the barrier between us. Alyssa heard me stop breathing and shouted my name. That snapped me out of it. I stumbled backward, unlocked my phone with numb fingers, and dialed 911. While it rang, I kept my eyes fixed on the door. His hand remained there for another few seconds. Then it slid away. I heard footsteps on the porch, not retreating, moving across it. I turned and ran into the kitchen, expecting to see him at the side window or heading for the back. Nothing. I checked the backyard through the glass. Empty. The dispatcher answered, and I tried to explain that there was a man outside my house who had walked up the driveway and touched my front door. Even as I said it, I knew how thin it sounded. Suspicious person. No threats made. No attempt to force entry. But my voice must have given something away because she told me officers were on their way. I went back to the front hall. The porch was empty. The driveway was empty. The street was empty. It was like he had dissolved. 2 officers arrived within 7 minutes. I know because I was watching the microwave clock like it meant something. They searched the yard, checked behind the garage, walked the fence line, even looked between my house and my neighbor's. No one. One of them asked if I had cameras. I didn't. He asked whether the man said anything. I said no. He asked if maybe he'd been intoxicated or confused. I said maybe, but I knew that wasn't it. Confused people don't stand motionless at the end of a driveway for 10 minutes before walking up like they've been invited. After they left, I didn't sleep. I sat on the living room couch with every light on and the TV muted, jumping at every passing car. Around 3 a.m., Alyssa convinced me to put a chair under the front doorknob and keep my phone charging beside me. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke up just after sunrise with the room washed gray and my neck stiff from the couch. What woke me wasn't a sound. It was the sense that something had changed. I sat up and looked toward the front door. Something white was lying on the mat outside. I moved closer, keeping stupidly quiet in my own house, and looked through the peephole. It was a photograph. Just a single glossy photo, face up on the welcome mat. I opened the door a few inches, snatched it, and locked the door again before I even looked at it. The picture was of my house. Not a listing photo or something pulled from online. It had been taken at night, from the street, with the porch light on. Recent. In the photo, the house looked exactly as it had a few hours earlier. And standing in the upstairs bedroom window, barely visible behind the blinds, was me. I didn't notice him at first because I was too busy looking for my dog. Milo had gotten out through the side gate just after 10. One second he was in the yard sniffing around the flower bed, and the next he was gone, squeezing through a section of fence I'd been meaning to fix for months. By the time I got my shoes on and ran outside, the street was quiet and empty, and all I could hear was some distant TV through an open window and the hum of traffic from the main road a few blocks over. Milo was small, part terrier, nervous around strangers, and dumb enough to chase anything that moved. So I spent the next 20 minutes walking up and down the block in sweatpants, calling his name in that half-whisper people use late at night when they don't want to wake the whole neighborhood. I checked under parked cars, behind hedges, around the empty lot at the corner. Nothing. When I came back toward my house, I saw someone standing in my driveway. At first, relief hit me so fast I almost called out because I thought maybe it was a neighbor who had found Milo and come over to ask whose dog was loose. But that feeling lasted maybe a second. The person was standing too far back, close to the garage, in the deepest patch of shadow where the porch light didn't quite reach. He wasn't bent down holding a leash. He wasn't looking around. He was just facing the front of the house in complete silence. I slowed down without meaning to. Something about the shape of him felt wrong right away. Not exaggerated, not obviously threatening, just wrong in a way my brain couldn't place. He looked tall and thin, with his arms hanging straight at his sides. I couldn't make out his face because of the dark, but I could tell he wasn't glancing at windows or checking his phone or doing any of the little normal things a person does while waiting outside. He had the stillness of something that had already been there a long time. I stopped at the edge of my lawn and called, "Can I help you?" No response. I said it louder, nothing. My first thought was that he might be drunk, or high, or maybe mentally unwell. My second thought was worse. My side gate was still partly open from when Milo got out. If this guy had come from the backyard, then he'd already been on my property before I ever saw him. I took my phone out and turned on the flashlight. The beam hit the driveway, the side of my car, the garage door, and finally him. He wasn't there. I jerked the light around. I'm convinced I just missed him stepping aside, but the driveway was empty. Completely empty. No footsteps running off, no gate swinging, no shape slipping behind the garage. There was nowhere he could have gone in the second it took me to raise the phone. I actually laughed under my breath, the way people do when they're trying not to panic. I told myself I was exhausted and on edge because of Milo. Shadows, bad angles, stress. That was all. I even stood there for another few seconds, staring at the garage, waiting for my heart rate to settle. Then I heard claws scraping on concrete behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my phone. Milo was standing in the middle of the street. He wasn't barking. He wasn't running toward me. He was completely still, staring past me toward the house with his ears pinned back so tight they looked flattened against his skull. I called his name, and usually that dog would come tearing over no matter what he was doing. This time, he didn't move. He just stood there trembling. I walked toward him slowly, crouched, and reached for his collar. The second my hand touched him, he flinched so violently he nearly slipped out from under me. When I finally got hold of him and turned back toward the house, I understood why. The man was there again. Same place in the driveway, same posture, same silence. My whole body went cold. Not fear like in movies, not screaming fear. It was deeper than that. It felt like something inside me had recognized danger before my mind caught up. Milo started growling, but it wasn't a normal growl. It was low and shaky, like he was trying to sound brave through raw panic. I backed toward the sidewalk without taking my eyes off the figure. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want to be anywhere near that driveway. The house suddenly felt wrong to me, like it didn't belong to me as long as he was standing there. I called my friend Darren because he lived 2 streets over, and because calling the police felt too ridiculous to explain. I kept my voice low and said, "There's someone in my driveway, and I don't know what he's doing." Darren asked if I was safe. I said I was outside with Milo. He told me to stay where I was and said he was coming over. While I waited, I stood near the curb under the street lamp with my dog pressed against my legs like he was trying to disappear behind me. The figure never moved. A car drove past at the far end of the block, and its headlights swept across the houses, and for just a second I got a clearer look at him. Dark jacket, dark pants, head slightly lowered, but no face. I know how stupid that sounds. He had a head, obviously, but where the face should have been, there was nothing I could describe afterward. No eyes catching light, no nose, no mouth, not even shadows where those things should have been. It was just absence. Like the darkness there was thicker than everywhere else. Darren pulled up fast enough to half-mount the curb. He jumped out before the engine was even off and walked up beside me, already asking what was going on. I pointed at the driveway, and his expression changed immediately. He saw him too. That should have made me feel better, having the fear confirmed by someone else. Instead, it made the whole thing real in the worst way. Darren squinted, muttered, "What the hell?" then shouted, "Hey!" The figure didn't react. Darren was a bigger guy than me, former linebacker type, the kind of person who defaulted to anger before fear. He started up the driveway before I could stop him. I grabbed his sleeve and told him not to go near him. He shook me off and kept walking. The moment Darren stepped onto the driveway, Milo went insane. He started barking so violently I thought he was going to choke himself. He clawed at my legs, trying to pull backward, then suddenly twisted around and bolted so hard, he ripped the leash out of my hand. He ran straight across the lawn and disappeared behind the side of the house. At the exact same moment, every light in front of my house went out. The porch light, the lamp in the entryway, even the soft light over the stove in the kitchen window. 1 second the house looked normal, the next it was dark, like the power had been cut. Darren stopped walking. The figure was gone. Not ran off, not hidden. Gone. Darren turned a full circle in the driveway, looking around like he couldn't understand what had just happened. I was already moving toward the side yard after Milo, calling for him, but my voice sounded thin and useless now. The gate was hanging open wider than before, tapping lightly against the fence. I found Milo under the deck in the backyard, wedged all the way against the foundation, shaking so badly I thought he might be having some kind of seizure. I had to crawl halfway under there and drag him out by the harness because he wouldn't come when I called, the whole time. I could feel Darren behind me, not talking, which was unlike him. Too quiet. When I finally stood back up, he was staring at the rear wall of the house. There was mud on the siding. At first I thought it was from Milo, or maybe from the rain earlier that week. Then I realized it was too high up. It ran in a long smear across the wall beneath the kitchen window, as if someone had placed both hands there and leaned in. There were marks below it too, streaked downward, like fingers dragging. Darren asked if I'd done that somehow while fixing the gate. I said no. He asked if Milo could have done it. I said no again because even in the dark, I could see the shape of the marks. They were too long, too narrow, not paw prints, hand prints. We went back inside through the rear door. The power was on in the rest of the neighborhood. And when I checked the breaker panel, nothing had tripped. But the front of the house stayed dark for another full minute before the lights flickered back by themselves. Darren tried to laugh it off and said maybe it was bad wiring. I could tell from his face he didn't believe that. Neither did I. I barely slept that night. Darren stayed until almost 3, mostly because I didn't ask him to leave. Before he went, he made me promise I'd call the police if I saw the guy again. I said I would. But once the sun came up, everything felt thinner, more explainable. The mud could have been something else. The power issue could have been a coincidence. The figure could have been some creep messing with me. The daylight always makes fear look embarrassed. Around noon, I decided to wash the siding before the marks dried in deeper. I brought out a bucket, a sponge, and the garden hose. Up close, the mud looked darker than I remembered, with little flecks of grass or leaves stuck in it. I scrubbed one of the streaks, and it thinned, but underneath it, scratched into the paint in uneven lines, were 3 words. Let it in. I stared at them so long, my knees started to feel weak. Not written with a marker, not smeared on top. Scratched into the siding underneath the mud, like someone had carved them there first, then covered them so I wouldn't notice until I got close enough to clean it. I dropped the sponge and went back inside with the hose still running. I called Darren first, then the police. The officer who came out looked at the scratches, took a few pictures, and asked if I had enemies, exes, problems with neighbors, anyone who might want to scare me. I kept waiting for him to react the way I felt, to understand how wrong the whole thing was, but he stayed stuck in the logic of vandalism and trespassing. He asked if anything had been stolen. It hadn't. He asked if anyone had tried to force entry. Not that I knew of. Then he asked the question that made the back of my neck tighten. Why was the side gate open? Because my dog ran out. Because something had already been in the yard. Because I didn't know. That evening, I replaced the gate latch and borrowed a camera from Darren to point at the driveway. I didn't even try to act normal anymore. I kept every light on, checked every lock twice, and made Milo stay inside no matter how much he scratched at the door. At 1:09 a.m., the camera alert hit my phone. I opened the live feed and saw my driveway in pale black and white. Empty. Then, after a second, I realized it wasn't empty. He was standing so close to the garage door that the camera had almost cropped him out. Just the edge of him at first, a shoulder and part of the head. Then he leaned slightly, bringing more of himself into frame, as if he understood exactly how cameras worked and wanted to be seen only a little at a time. Milo started barking before I even moved. I watched the screen, frozen, as the figure slowly raised one arm and pointed toward the front door. Not knocking, not waving, pointing. Then the camera feed cut to black. A second later, from somewhere deep inside the house, 3 slow knocks sounded from the hallway wall behind me. I thought it was my reflection the first time I saw him. I was standing at the sink just after 1 o'clock in the morning, half awake, filling a glass of water in a dark kitchen, lit only by the stove clock and the little security light over the garage. The window above the sink looked straight out to the driveway, and when I lifted my head, I caught the outline of a person standing out there, and my brain immediately did what brains do at that hour. It tried to make the shape harmless. A reflection, a shadow, a trick of glass. Then I moved, and the shape didn't. The glass slipped out of my hand and shattered in the sink. I didn't even flinch. I just stared through the window with water running over my fingers, watching a man stand in my driveway under the weak yellow light like he had all the time in the world. He was near the passenger side of my truck, facing the house. Not pacing, not checking doors, not looking around to see if anyone was watching, just standing there in a way that made the entire scene feel staged, like I'd walked into the middle of something that had started before I got there. I shut off the faucet and crouched beneath the window so quickly my knee hit the cabinet. My heart was slamming hard enough to make my jaw feel tight. I stayed down there, barely breathing, counting silently in my head and waiting for footsteps, a knock, any sound that would make sense of what I'd just seen. Nothing came. After maybe 20 seconds, I rose slowly and looked again. He was still there. I lived alone then, in a narrow rental house at the end of a cul-de-sac where every driveway faced every other one. During the day, it felt safe in that boring suburban way people like to talk about, but at night, it had a sealed-off feeling I never really noticed until that moment. All the neighboring houses were dark, no TVs through the windows, no porch conversations, no dogs barking, just one silent man in my driveway, and a whole street apparently asleep through it. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app, mostly because it felt better than standing there doing nothing. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to focus through the glass. The picture I got was awful, blurred by darkness and my own reflection, but it was enough to prove there was someone out there. A person-shaped figure, tall, dark jacket, standing beside my truck like he was thinking about it. I sent the photo to my friend Lena with the message, "Tell me I'm not insane." She responded almost immediately with, "Call the police." I didn't. Not yet. I wish I could say it was because I was calm and rational, but really it was because I felt embarrassed. He hadn't tried to get in. He hadn't damaged anything. He was just standing there, and some part of me was still desperate for a normal explanation. Maybe he was drunk and confused. Maybe he had the wrong house. Maybe he was waiting for somebody. Maybe the world still worked the way it was supposed to. Then he moved. It was small, just a turn of the head, not toward the street, toward the window, toward me. Every muscle in my body locked. The kitchen was dark behind me. There was no way he should have been able to see me clearly through the glare on the glass. But the second his head turned, I knew with complete certainty that he knew exactly where I was standing. I backed away from the sink, one slow step at a time, never taking my eyes off him. When I reached the hall, I turned off the kitchen light switch out of instinct, even though the room was already mostly dark. That was when the motion light over the garage went out. Not flickered, not dimmed, out. The driveway disappeared into a wash of black so sudden it felt deliberate, like someone had cut the scene with a blade. For a second, I couldn't see anything at all. Then my eyes adjusted just enough to catch a silhouette still standing there where the light had been. I finally called 911. The dispatcher asked for my address, asked whether the person was armed, asked if he had attempted entry. I kept looking through the gap between the hall and kitchen while answering, and what scared me most was that the figure never seemed impatient. He wasn't testing doors or peeking through windows. He was waiting, calmly, patiently, like the important part of the night hadn't happened yet. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and asked if I could remain somewhere secure. I went upstairs to my bedroom because it faced the front of the house, and from there, I could watch the driveway without being right next to the door. I locked the bedroom, though I knew how useless that was, and crouched beside the window. The driveway was empty. My stomach dropped so hard it actually hurt. I scanned the yard, the sidewalk, the street, the neighbor's lawn, everywhere the moonlight touched. Nothing. There was nowhere obvious he could have gone. My fenced backyard had only one gate, and I would have heard it. The side yard was too narrow to move through quickly without scraping the trash bins. The front porch was visible from my angle. Then I realized what I couldn't see. The space directly below my bedroom window. I stayed frozen there until the patrol car arrived. 2 officers searched the property with flashlights while I watched from upstairs like a child too scared to come down. They checked the porch, the backyard, behind the shed, along the fence line, even beneath the truck. Nothing. One of them knocked, and I finally let them in. I showed them the blurry photo from the kitchen window, but it didn't help much. It showed a shape, not a face. They took my statement, told me to keep the doors locked, and suggested maybe someone had wandered onto the wrong property. "People do weird things at night," one of them said. That sentence stayed with me because of how badly it fit. Weird was someone trying a car door. Weird was a drunk guy singing in the street. Weird was not a silent figure standing motionless in front of a dark house and vanishing before police arrived. The next day, I checked everything. The truck doors were locked, nothing stolen, no footprints that I could see, though the concrete wouldn't have held them anyway. I told myself I'd done the right thing. I told myself it was over. But that night, I left every light on and put a dining chair under the front doorknob, like that could save me from anything. Around midnight, Lena came over with coffee and that kind of forced humor people use when they're trying not to make your fear bigger. She walked the property with me, checked the side yard, and even stood in the driveway where I'd seen him trying to recreate my photo. In daylight, the whole thing looked pathetic, like the setup for a misunderstanding that had gotten out of control in my head. Then Lena asked a question I hadn't thought to ask myself. "Why your truck?" I looked at her and said I didn't know. She pointed out that he hadn't stood near the front door or the garage entrance. He had stood beside the passenger side of the truck, near the back door. Not random, specific. Like that spot mattered. That unsettled me more than the original sighting. That afternoon, I cleaned out the truck for no real reason except nerves. Old receipts, gym clothes, empty water bottles, a dead phone charger in the center console. When I opened the rear passenger door, something slid off the seat and hit the driveway. It was a Polaroid photo, not an old one, a fresh one. The image had already developed fully, and the second I saw it, I felt cold all over. It was a picture of me in my kitchen, taken from outside the window. The angle was lower than my eye level, as if whoever took it had been standing close to the glass and slightly off to one side. In the photo, I was holding the water glass right before I dropped it. My face was turned toward the window, toward the camera, toward him. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on the driveway with my back against the truck tire, staring at that little white bordered photo while my breathing turned shallow and fast. That meant he hadn't just stood out there. He'd come close enough to photograph me through the window, close enough that if I had looked up a few seconds earlier, we would have been staring directly at each other through the glass. Lena found me like that 5 minutes later and took the photo out of my hand without asking. She went completely pale. That finally pushed things into a category the police couldn't shrug off. We called them again. An officer came back, collected the photo, dusted the truck, asked more questions. Had I given anyone a ride recently? Had anyone been inside the vehicle? Did I have enemies, exes, anyone obsessed with me? I kept saying no, because I didn't. That was part of what made it so bad. There was no story to attach it to, no messy breakup, no neighbor dispute, no reason for a stranger to be that close to my house, my kitchen window, my truck. Random fear is harder to process than targeted fear because there's nothing to solve. That night, Lena refused to let me stay alone, so she camped on my couch with a blanket and a kitchen knife she'd taken for herself, even though I told her that was a terrible plan. We left the living room lamp on and the TV running low for noise. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a pressure in the room that didn't feel like sound exactly, more like the sense that someone else was awake. Lena was sitting bolt upright on the couch, staring toward the front window. I whispered her name, and she lifted one hand without looking at me. There was someone standing in the driveway again, from the couch. We could only see him through a narrow gap in the blinds, but it was enough. Same height, same stillness, same impossible feeling that he was not there to approach the house, or leave it, or do anything a normal trespasser would do. He was simply occupying that space like he belonged in it. Lena reached for her phone. Before she unlocked it, the porch light came on by itself. The driveway flooded with light, and for the first time, I got a clear look at him. I almost wish I hadn't. His clothes were ordinary. Dark hoodie, jeans, work boots. Nothing dramatic, but his face looked wrong in a way I still can't explain without sounding insane. It wasn't hidden. I could see skin, the outline of features, the shape of eyes, but everything looked slightly misplaced. Like a face assembled from memory by someone who'd never actually seen one before. The smile was the worst part. Too wide, but faint. Not an expression of happiness, more like recognition. Lena sucked in air beside me and whispered, "Don't move." He raised one hand slowly and tapped the side of the truck with a single knuckle. Just once. A dull metal click carried across the driveway. Then every unlocked car on the cul-de-sac started blaring their alarms at the exact same time. Lights flashed up and down the street. Horns screamed in overlapping bursts. Neighboring houses came alive all at once with porch lights and startled silhouettes at windows. For one chaotic second, the whole block woke up. And in all that noise, with all that light, I watched him step backward into the dark space between my truck and the garage. He should have still been visible. He wasn't. The alarms kept going until the street felt hysterical. Lena and I ran outside because suddenly hiding inside seemed worse than seeing where he'd gone. Neighbors were spilling onto porches in robes and slippers, looking around, shouting to each other, trying key fobs. We rounded the truck, expecting to find him crouched beside the garage or running through the side yard. There was no one there, but on the concrete, exactly where he'd been standing, was a second Polaroid. Lena picked it up first. Then she made a sound I had never heard another human make before and dropped it like it had burned her. I bent down and saw why. It was a picture of my bedroom, taken from inside the house.